at the end of the book, you do predict that this is going to happen with Ohtani. Do you think, from what I understand, so the audience knows, Ohtani is the face of baseball right now. As a Japanese player, he both pitches and he hits extraordinarily well in both. So he's compared to Babe Ruth in that sense. They're really the first player since Babe Ruth who can do that. And I think a $700 million contract. Suddenly it emerges that his Japanese translator is implicated in this gambling scheme as well. $4.5 million are wired from Ohtani's account, which I guess is a pittance if you're earning $700 million. But it goes to some bookie. And then there are three possibilities, as I understand it. You correct me if I'm wrong. Either the translator, without Ohtani's knowledge, managed to wire $4.5 million of Ohtani's money to pay off this debt. That's option number one. Option number two is Ohtani feels sorry for his friend and recognizes he's in debt. And so with Ohtani's knowledge, he wires off $4.5 million to cover his friend's debt. The third and worst option for Ohtani is that Ohtani is gambling, and it is his own debt, and he paid his own debts off with the $4.5 million wire. Your thoughts on those three options, or perhaps a fourth, and what's going to happen here?
I don't want to speculate at this hour about what actually happened. What I can say from a historical perspective is what is likely to happen. We all like to think that, Pete Rose made some bets and then he got in trouble for it right away and it was all buttoned up in a matter of hours or days or weeks. That's not how it went down. The trouble that Pete Rose faced in 1989 for his gambling were for decisions that were made a few years earlier. Mm-hmm. And once it was known, in the way we now know about these allegations swirling around Shohei Ohtani's camp, once it was known, it took months for us to get to some kind of resolution.
Sorry to interrupt. How do we know about the $4.5 million wire? How did that news emerge that this wire happened?
Reporting from the Los Angeles Times and ESPN, who have been at the forefront of this
So it's
story.
quite possible the FBI has been onto this for some time long prior to us learning about it in the media.
What we know is that, again, these alleged debts involving Shohei Ohtani's interpreter go back at least a couple of years.
Oh my God, we're seeing it all over again, potentially. The parallels are amazing.
The parallel that's most stark to me is that, Pete Rose didn't have an interpreter, obviously, but he did have guys in his inner circle. Mm-hmm. And those guys were the ones who were placing his bets. Not Pete. Pete very rarely, based on my reporting and even Pete's own admissions, Pete very, very rarely, if ever, called a bookie directly. It was his guys, his closest friends. They placed the bets for Pete. And it was those guys who first popped up onto the radar of federal officials. And by that, I mean the FBI in Cincinnati. And they didn't pop up on the radar in February 1989 when Bart Giamatti and Fay Vincent first heard about Pete's gambling or alleged gambling on baseball. Those men popped up on the radar of the FBI in Cincinnati in 1987, in 1988. And one by one, these men around Pete started to go down. Yeah. And they started to turn on each other. And so the one thing I can say for certain at this hour, and I do think there are very, very few things that we can say for certain about Shohei Ohtani and his interpreter and whatever has happened here with alleged gambling debts. The one thing I can say is this: we are not finished with this story by a long shot.